Hello once again, and welcome back to the Global Gaming Network channel, the place where we get to go over everything to do with esports across the entirety of the globe. Plenty to talk about today as we got League of Legends, Valorant, Counter-Strike, and Call of Duty news to go over. This is Today in Esports. Hey you, it's us, and we're back again for this fine Thursday for another episode of Today in Esports. As always, my name is Andy. Joining with me is Chris. How was your week so far, man?
It's doing great, but as you said, it's Thursday, which means everything is coming up for the weekend, so I'm super excited. But as we know, the last qualifier for Major 3 is coming up. Can you give us a rundown on that?
Absolutely, yeah. As Chris was just stating, we do have Call of Duty Major 3 final weekend of qualifiers to get underway, and there's plenty to talk about as we are more than halfway through the rest of the regular season for the Call of Duty League. Kind of periscoping out real quick as far as the major standings are concerned, things are shaking up in a way that we should be putting a lot of focus on some bottom barrel teams, specifically those teams that are outside of the top 8 for the overall standings. They're on the bubble to actually not make champs at all. So if you don't make top 8 within the final regular season in these overall standings, then you will not make champs. So Cloud9 New York, Minnesota Rocker, LA Gorilla Mates, Vegas Falcons are all underneath the periscope, and even Optic Texas and Miami Heretics are technically underneath the limelight as they are inside the bubble. Just a handful of more points to be thrown around as we get ready for Major 3, and as Chris was saying, is the final weekend of qualifiers. Miami Heretics look great. They are undefeated so far, more guaranteed than not to start in the winner's bracket if you do place in top 8 at the end of this weekend. So Vegas Falcons, Cloud9 New York, Minnesota Rocker, and Los Angeles Gorilla Mates, they have so much to do just to guarantee that they make it into the winner's bracket, let alone get a sufficient amount of points in Boca Raton, Florida for Major 3 to make a dent in towards that bubble to make it towards champs. We got a lot of matches to go over this upcoming weekend. Again, we got 3 matches Friday, 3 matches on Saturday, or 4 matches, Saturday, and 3 matches on Sunday. But we're going to be taking a focus on 1 match per day, starting off with the number 1 seeded team. We're talking about the Miami Heretics going up against the Toronto Ultra. Toronto Ultra have been absolutely on fire as of late. They have beaten Atlanta Faze, they beat LAT on LAN, and they just are clear-cut at the top of their game. For Toronto Ultra as a whole, they are 2-1 for series count, with their 1 series loss maybe staining their record, but their hardpoint looks amazing. Miami on the other side, undefeated. They just made that 1 change for Super coming in towards the roster, benching Lucky. He's playing alongside AR duo of Rancor. The team looks absolutely nasty. Now shifting our focus over towards Saturday. Atlanta Faze going up against the Las Vegas Falcons. And this probably wouldn't be a major talking point if the Falcons didn't beat Optic Texas, but if they beat Faze here, they could actually start in the winner's bracket. The other side of that, Faze are actually under threat to start in the lower bracket probably since God knows when. Atlanta Faze are still the number 1 team of the game. Major 2 champion, Minor 2 champion. They are clearly still the number 1 team as far as all are concerned, and you do not bat an eyelash at them as they are trying to boast a bigger and more robust map pool. But Vegas Falcons, throughout all of their roster changes, are looking deadly. Not only have they won a hard point finally, but they are actually 4-1 in the game mode, have yet to convert a search and destroy with a handful of round 11s along the way. But I am hopeful that maybe they could beat Atlanta Faze in 4 maps. But if it goes map 5, Atlanta Faze got that all day. You know that they don't want to be starting that lower bracket. Finally, on Sunday, we got a major matchup happening in between the Los Angeles Thieves going up against the Carolina Royal Ravens. LA Thieves, as I was saying, since losing that 1 series to Toronto Ultra, they actually are under threat to not get a higher seed than they are wanting to, depending on what happens going in towards that series for this weekend. But LAT could be in contention for a top 3 seed, and they've been under scrutiny as of late. They're still under a big magnifying glass for being the best control team in the game, but this team right here, the Royal Ravens, are looking to make a dent into that. They're 0-4 in control, so don't expect them to take map 3, but their hardpoint looks great. Their search and destroy is getting even better, and they're coming in towards their final qualifier match with a certain better gunny in towards the backline. I'm talking about Dylan Rex, of course. This roster for Carolina Royal Ravens just made a massive roster change after TJ Halley ended up saying post-match win that they were all good over there. Turns out that they were not. They're making roster changes behind the lines and behind the curtains. Dylan Rex is going to be that guy now joining this roster. Has a lot of stints in Challengers. He did win with FaZe Clan Black, going back in towards the Toronto Open for Challengers this past season, but then also is a Challengers Elite Season 2 champion playing alongside Omid. Did not have a great showcasing in Allen, Texas. I think he placed like maybe top 12, maybe top 8 or something like that. But Dylan is highly regarded not only for being an absolute gunny on the map, but for being a very vocal player as well. I think joining alongside for both Slasher and Gwen, as well as TJ, the slaying may be a little bit brought up to a level that Carolina might need. I don't think that they're going to beat LA Thieves. This is a really strong test for Rex to get thrown in towards the mix, immediately playing up against his former teammate of Scrap back in Vanguard, but should still be a fun one nonetheless. But that's all we got as far as Call of Duty is concerned. Now we're going to be shifting our focus over towards the Rift with Chris.
Yes, and what a weekend it will be. So we are jumping into LAT. They are going to be having their week 3 before they go into the group standings. So let's go ahead and take a look at those standings now and how they're stacking up into the weekend. We have FlyQuest sitting at 4-0 right now, Lyon 3-0. Those are the teams that are going to be looking to compete for that first place spot. But we also have Cloud9 Kia, Team Honda also at 3-1. We have 100 Thieves at 2-2. Shopify Rebellion are going to be 1-3, and then Dignitas Shopify Rebellion 1-3, and Disguise 0-4 right now. So right now it's going to be shaping up to be a big weekend going into it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of those matches and how they're going to be stacking up. First, we're going to be looking at first LTA South, as they will be going into theirs as well. Vivo Keystar 4-0, Furia Pain Gaming 3-1, Leviathan and Red 2-2, Loud FW7M and IS are sitting at the bottom of the table as well. But as I was saying, let's go ahead and kick it off to LTA North and some of the key matchups that they're going to have there. First, it is going to be 100 Thieves versus Lyon, who are both sitting at that spot of 3-1. Or actually, sorry, Lyon 3-1, 100 Thieves 2-2. So they're sitting at the mid-table. But who will be able to take that 4th place spot is going to be really big. Both of these teams are coming in. Of course, 100 Thieves had a bit of a stronger strengths of schedule going against some of those top teams, whereas Lyon played against the bottom 3 teams as well before they faced off against Team Liquid last weekend, where they got their first loss. So we'll have to see how they compete against each other and who can maybe take that 4th place spot before going into the group phase next week. But let's go ahead and take a look at a big matchup now. It is going to be C9 versus, well, almost everyone over the weekend, and if they can win, they can possibly take that first spot. So C9 will be playing against FlyQuest, Lyon, and almost as well Team Liquid, and they're going to have a big match ahead of them. So of course, Team Liquid all 3-1, Lyon 3-1 as well, FlyQuest 4-0. If they can take these wins, they will be able to take the first spot. And of course, even if they lose one of them as well, and FlyQuest lose, they will both be sitting 6-1, and then they'll be able to take that first place spot over a tiebreaker against FlyQuest. And of course, they'll want to get that tiebreaker against Lyon as well to possibly take a 2nd place seed if needed. So all these teams, all these games for C9 are going to be really big going into the weekend, because of course, going into that group phase, you'll want to make sure that you have the best possible seeding so that you have the best possible placement before you go into playoffs later this split. So that's going to be all for LTA, but let's go ahead and go across the pond to EMEA, who did have some matches on Monday, and well, they were quite a banger. So taking a look at the first game, we did end up having SK versus Giant X. SK did end up winning 2-0, pretty easy game for them, but the big one was going to be KC versus Team Heretics. It went all 3 games, and what a match it was. Let's jump into the Rift. And let's go ahead and jump into the Rift here. The first game between Team Heretics and KC. Well, Team Heretics started on the lead here in the 33rd minute. We're going to see Team KC actually pick up the Baron, but, well, Team Heretics was a little upset about this. They're going to go ahead and jump in, get a couple of kills here, and just make sure that they can't use that Baron buff, and no way for them to get back in the game. Let's look at the jump over here, the knock into the wall. They're going to go ahead and get that kill on to Vladdy, take them out, and here they are jumping into KC's base. They're going to go ahead and get a couple of Constellation Prize kills here. They're going to get it, take the Nexus, and take game number 1. And what a big statement, 22 kills to 3. They put on an absolute clinic and shut down KC. But, well, KC's been in this position before. Going into game number 2, Team Heretics up once again, but the Otacon here would be a big contention point. They were down 1. They thought they could get the 5v4 against KC, but it wouldn't matter as Yike got a massive smite to get it. They're going to get it here. Take the Otacon. They have the withdrawals. It doesn't matter if they die. They just get sent back to base, and they deny it. They use this momentum. They're going to go ahead and take game number 2 bringing that all the way back, 28 kills to 20, an absolute slugfest between the teams, but it's 1-1. Here we go into game number 3, and once again, Heretics in the lead, but KC are like, well, we've been in here before. Despite losing this top battle, they should have gotten a good rotation from the Swain. It's going to allow them to get those 2 kills, but it's going to be flipped once again at this Otacon, but this time it is going to be the Ruinous Otacon, and guess what? They get the kill, but it doesn't matter, the petals come out, so KC are going to go ahead and turn this fight. They're going to get an ace here, which will give the momentum that they need to go ahead and get into the enemy base, get forward a couple minutes here, because it wouldn't be long until they got into the base, 30 minutes. As you see, very close score line, 12-13, but that's all KC needed at the end to take this series 2-1 versus Team Heretics, and probably their toughest match yet, no matter who they played so far. They played G2, they played Koi, they have played everyone else, but it was Team Heretics that took them to the 2-1, and they were down all 3 games, but they managed to come back in the 2 others to get those. But great job by them, and we'll have to see how they stack up in the weekend coming. As they are playing the round robin, they will have more standings, but let's go and take a look at those to see how the teams are stacking up in Europe right now. G2 Esports sitting at the top 3-0, Carmine Corp 3-1, along with Fnatic, Toystar, and Heretics are sitting 2-1, BDS 2-3, SK, Giant X, Team Vitality, and Rogue only have 1 win, are sitting at the bottom. As you remember, we want the top 8 teams are going to be the only ones who move on to the playoffs, so they want to start trying to find some of those wins to see if they can make out the playoff stage later in the split. That's going to wrap it up for EMEA. At the moment, we will have some matches being played, so we'll take a look at those matches I'll be playing over the weekend. On Saturday, we have Fnatic versus Rogue, Giant X versus Carmine Corp. Sunday, Vitality versus Heretics, and BDS versus G2. And on Monday, we'll have SK versus Rogue, and Koi versus Team Vitality. And in other league news, a massive milestone was hit for HLA's Peanut, who has hit 500 wins in the LCK. He is going to be the 2nd player to ever do it behind Faker, and the 1st jungler to do it as well. 500 wins is massive, so congratulations to him. That was done earlier today in their win in their series this morning, or afternoon, evening for them. But congratulations, Peanut, for hitting that milestone. Can't wait to see more, because we know HLE is doing great this season.
And that's all we got as far as League of Legends are concerned, but let us know how you are faring as far as the Rift, whether that's LEC, LTA, or maybe you're watching something a little bit more on the Eastern Hemisphere. But keeping our focus within Riot per usual, now we're going to be taking a focus over towards our tactical shooter, aka Valorant, starting off with Americas. And well, VCT Americas, they are rounding out their final week of matches as far as group plays are concerned, and here's currently how the groups are stacking up against each other. Right now for Group Alpha, you got a 2-way tie in between at the top between 100 Thieves versus Crew Esports. We'll be talking more about that in a little bit. Sentinels and EG are rounding out for the 3rd and 4th. That's already solidified. 2G and Loud are out. They won't be making playoffs. But for Group Omega, G2 Esports and MIBR are sitting at the top. Cloud9 nipping at their ankles at 3 and 1 as well. Leviathan and NRG are having a 2-way tie at 1 and 3 apiece. And then Furia are fully eliminated. So realistically, you got some seeding matchups happening this upcoming weekend, but the most important part is going to be that Group Omega matchup. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit, as we do have matchups that are happening throughout the entirety of the weekend, 1 day at a time, 1 series at a time, starting off with Crew versus 100 Thieves. Yeah, Crew versus 100 Thieves is going to be the #1 seed matchup coming away from Group Alpha. And the one thing that Crew dropping the EG last week was a wild turn of events. They lost the Lotus 4-13, 7-13 on Pearl, and you think that 100 Thieves might be able to take that and run away with it as well. With their underperformance in Week 1 versus Sentinels, a lot of people had them batting eyelashes at 100 Thieves. They lost to Haven 5-13, and then a 1-13 on Split, but they did win their 2nd map pick 13-9. So if you win this series, you see it right here. You clinch the #1 seed within your group. You get a 1st round bye in that elimination bracket at the end of for playoffs. But losing to O2, like I said, for Crew, nobody saw that one coming, but they did gift EG a playoff berth. Defeating 100 Thieves last time that they did face off against each other way back in the playoffs, so you think that Crew might have a good chance here. But 100 Thieves, in my opinion, have been looking better and better. We know what their IGL Boostio is capable of. Now shifting our focus over towards G2 versus Cloud9. And this is going to be the #1 seed matchup coming away from Group Omega. You have to assume that G2's got this one in the bag, baby. I mean, they are the #2 team coming away from Masters Bangkok for a reason. They may have dropped a couple maps along the way, but I don't think that Cloud9's really got the grit to be able to take care of G2 here. Cloud9 might be able to take a map off of G2, maybe like a Pearl or a Fracture, depending on what map pick that they're looking for. Those are the two maps that G2 have lost through the group stage so far, but G2 should have that first seed more than locked up ahead of that playoff bracket. You know that they're smelling blood in the water for that first round bye. Now for the meat and potatoes of the weekend. That #4 spot for Group Omega is up for grabs, and that's for Leviathan going up against NRG. Let me explain a little bit more. The loser of this misses out on playoffs and a chance to actually compete for Masters Toronto. Leviathan have been looking much better as of late. They are 3-6 for their maps, 82 and 98 for round count, but they have a 13-11 Fracture win versus G2 back in week 4. A 13-4 win on Ascent versus Fudia, as well as the 13-5 win on Pearl. NRG on the opposite side do not have as many boasting map wins. Both of these two teams, their only series win is versus Fudia, so there's really not a whole lot to go off of. But for Leviathan, they have played top teams in this group a whole hell of a lot closer than NRG has. I do not rate NRG as high as Leviathan. Both of their wins, again, came away from Fudia, but I will not lie. Demon 1 on Leviathan has been looking so much better. He's been looking in championship form again, and you know that's a scary feat for anybody to go up against. I really do think that Leviathan is going to be able to take this series either 2-1, 2-0, does not matter. They're probably going to be making playoffs. So here's that full-on schedule that we do have throughout the entirety of the weekend. G2 versus Cloud9, winner gets that first seed. MIBR versus Fudia. Fudia are already eliminated, so MIBR might be trying to test a couple of maps. Sentinels versus 2G. 2G already eliminated. Crew versus 100 Thieves, that's that first seed from Group Alpha. And then Loud already being eliminated to the new playoff berth team from last week's win. EG taking down Crew are going to be feeling pretty darn good about themselves. And again, that 8 p.m. matchup on Sunday, that's what we're all going to be sitting there really excited for. Leviathan versus NRG, winner makes it into playoffs.
And that's a great rundown for Americas. Let's go ahead and jump over the pond once again and take a look at EMEA. As they did have some matches starting tomorrow, we'll go ahead and jump into what's happening in the Europe Valorant scene. All right, let's take a look at the standings here, and we've already had some teams eliminated as well. Let's take a first look at Group Alpha. Fnatic, Heretics, Vitality, and Na'Vi have all made it through Group Alpha. Giant X and APEKS have been eliminated. In Group Omega, we do have Team Liquid sitting at the top. BBL, Esports, Carmine Corp, and Food will all be fighting to make sure they stay in the bubble. General Mates will also has a fighting chance, but Koi has been eliminated. All right, and as I said, we did have some matches start. As we know, they like to play during the weekdays. Vitality versus APEK and Team Liquid and MKoi did play yesterday. We'll run over those matches in a little bit, but looking at today, we have M8 versus BBL, Giant X versus Fnatic, and then tomorrow we'll have Carmine Court versus Food, and then Na'Vi versus Team Heretics. All right, let's go ahead and jump into yesterday's matches, and we'll start with that APEK game and see how they fared out. As we know, they have been eliminated, but let's take a look at how it happened. And we'll take a look at Team Vitality versus APEK. APEK has been eliminated, but let's see how it happened. Map 1 went to a sit, APEK's pick. Team Vitality would end up dominating the first half 11-1, then they would find the final 2 rounds needed in the second half to win the map. Going on to map 2, Lotus, it would be a closer map, which would end 13-10, with APEK actually dominating the first half, but it would be Team Vitality to come back in that second half, pick up that second map win to end the series 2-0 and knock APEK out of contention for the playoffs. Now let's move on to our next one, where we have Team Liquid versus Koi. Team Liquid versus Koi. Team Liquid would actually go into the first half pretty close, 7-5 on Lotus, which was Koi's pick. They would continue their streak into the second half, only limiting Koi to 4-round wins, ending the map 13-9. Then going to Split, which would be Team Liquid's pick. They would dominate the map in the first half 8-4 and then limit Koi to only 1-round win, where they would win 13-5, essentially knocking Koi out of playoff contention as well for EMEA. Great job for them winning that 2-0 and staying at the top of their league. And that's our wrap up for EMEA for Valorant.
Reminder, as far as playoffs are concerned, if you win your group, you get a first round bye in the playoff bracket. If you place 4th, you actually start in the lower bracket, so you don't get that golden mushroom of a second life or a double elimination bracket. Second and third teams will be playing up against each other from either of those two groups. in the opening round for playoffs. It's all going down very, very quickly. And it's not just these two regions. Again, you do have the Chinese region as well as the Pacific to keep in mind that there's a lot of competition for Valorant happening across the entirety of the globe. But we're going to be putting the controller on the shelf just for a short little while. We're going to be taking a scope out to talk a little bit about the news. Starting off with some Rocket League. This is launching a monthly cash cup, a total of 390,000 in 2025. This is starting back in April 22nd, so this is upcoming. It will feature a lot of games for 1v1s, 2v2s, and basketball-inspired hoops as well. Should be a lot of fun for the Rocket League community.
And jumping over to Counter-Strike, Astro has announced for Envy that they are possibly eyeing to get back into Counter-Strike. Well, that's great. They disbanded their team in 2001, so we'll have to see if they get back into it and how they do. We'll have to see who they pick up. If you have any ideas of who you think they might get back into the scene with, let us know in the comments. We'll be excited to hear what you think.
Full Esports World Cup information has fully been dropped now. We know where the schedule is going to be playing for Esports World Cup, and it should be a banger as far as a couple weeks are concerned. They're on the Esports Boulevard in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. 25 games are going to be taking the center, and it's going to be overseen from the weeks from July 7th all the way to August 4th. Over 2,000 players will be competing on Esports Boulevard for across 200 clubs to be competing for a total of $70 million in total prizing. Should be an absolute banger come around the summertime. Not to mention how roster lock for all of the Esports World Cup is coming around in about a month's time. So you know that a lot of organizations are going to be making a lot of these roster changes for a lot of different teams to make their dent into the club championship. But now we're going to be taking the controller, or I guess the mouse and keyboard, off of the shelf this time around. We're going to be talking a little bit about Counter-Strike. A lot of people have seen this going down. We talked about it at a low level while we were going through PGL Bucharest. m0nesy is leaving G2 for Falcons in a multi-million-dollar deal. This is taking the world by storm. For all intents and purposes, this blockbuster has led m0nesy to actually take his AWP all the way over to the Falcons. The move dropped right after PGL Bucharest, with G2 CEO confirming it on the 13th of April. m0nesy's contract wasn't set to expire anyway until September, but G2 gave him an early release. Rumor has it, Falcons dropped a cool $2.5 million for said buyout, where G2 says they let him go early to jumpstart their rebuild. And you can't blame them for wanting a fresh start. And here's the kicker. m0nesy actually faced off against the Falcons, his new squad at PGL Bucharest, and he's now stepping in for the MVP of that matchup of Dexter. Since joining G2 in January 2022, m0nesy has been a force. 37 lands, 6 big LAN wins, including a Blast Premier World 2024, Fall 2024, IEM Dallas 24, Cologne 2023, Katowice 23, and Blast Premier World 2022. And a sizzling 1.41 KD ratio and an AWP as accurate as all get out. You know that the Falcons are definitely walking away with this one with a smile on their face. The Falcons just landed an absolute superstar, and all eyes are going to be on how he shines going into IEM Melbourne. Buckle up, because this one is going to be absolutely electric.
But let's switch up gears, and now that G2 has a hole, how are they going to fill it? They have announced that they will be signing Hades to a limited contract. Let's take a look a little more into that. So, as I said, they've snagged Hades, and it's going to be till end of June. It's going to be a trial run to see if he fit right, and as the deal stretches through Blast Awesome Major, so they have time for Hades. And coming in, Monty, he's been raising AWPR in the lower leagues. No lands this year yet, but his stats hold up: a 1.19 KD, 74.7 damage per round, 33.9 headshot, and 1.11 rating. He's hovering in the top 30 of the HLTV's world rankings and proving he's got game. But of course, he has to prove it on stage. So Hades has a history with G2 Snacks, and they've teamed up at IEM Dallas in 22, and they made waves through ENCA in 9 and hitting Worlds #2 with ENCA at 22 and second place in IEM Dallas. So we'll have to see how he shakes up here. And of course, they do have a big job going into IEM Melbourne, where he's going to have to prove his worth with G2. So as we see some of the picks here, he's getting some of the clips here. We'll see how he stacks up on 9, getting some of those shots. But of course, he has some big shoes to fill from m0nesy. m0nesy being probably the second best player in the world right now. You know, how is he going to stack up? How is G2 going to fare as they're picking up this player? You know, you're losing a world talent to possibly a rising star, but it's going to take some time for them to shake up together and start to mesh to see if the G2 can rise to that, you know, grand final status once again.
Everybody's looking for that new donk, man. Everybody wants for that big impact player to level up their team so that way they can end up competing against both M0nesy and, I guess, Vitality at the end of the day. Because when we start to take a further scope out, like we kept on hinting, IEM Melbourne is right on the horizon. And there's a lot to talk about as the next Counter-Strike tournament is bringing the big dogs back. People were sitting there in speculation for PGL Bucharest, as we did have Falcons, again, claim that trophy, but Vitality, M0nesy, and Spirit, they were missing. IEM Melbourne is on the horizon. It's starting April 21st, and it's going all the way to the 24th as far as group stages are concerned. 16 invited teams and 2 8-team double elimination GSL-style brackets are going to be enveloped for the entirety of this tournament. All matches will be best of 3 until we reach grand finals, where we will see that best of 5. But separating 2 of these groups into 8-team double elimination bracket is going to create for a lot of different high-level action, right? You got M0nesy inside the same group with Complexity, the Mongols, as well as Faze, and then on the other side, you got Vitality there with VP, Liquid, Falcons, MIBR, and Na'Vi. You can clearly see that Team Spirit actually pulled out from IEM Melbourne back on the 4th, thus Complexity will be taking their place. But we do end up having the new Falcons coming in to compete. We do have Vitality and M0nesy, your grand finalists from back at the Blast Premier event, now joining the fray, as well as that PGL Bucharest champion. So there's a lot of action still to unpack. As I was saying, all of that is going down on April 21st for groups, and the action will continue to unfold as the weeks go on. So you want to make sure that you tune back in on the Monday's episode so that we can go over everything to do with Counter-Strike, what you're missing for Valorant from the weekend, Call of Duty League, what the next major is going to be looking like, as well as League of Legends. Did we miss anything? You let us know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, all of the good stuff, and let's get on this weekend together with all of the action and all on behalf involved behind the scenes. This has been Today in Esports.